Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live session today. My name is Larissa, and I'm joining you from São Paulo, in Brazil. Before we start, I have some housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. This session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand here on the Reactor YouTube channel within 48 hours. Keep an eye on the chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenter to answer at the end of the session. Now, I'll hand over our session to our speaker today. So let's welcome Diego Casati.
Hey, Larissa, thank you. Appreciate the intro there. Folks, Diego Casati from the Global Black Belt team. Today, the topic is Advanced Observability Concepts, and we're going to be using the AKS labs for that. If you haven't had a chance to get familiar with AKS labs, I highly suggest it. It's something that the AKS product group has put together. It's a curated set of labs. I'll show you the link for that, which is under the azure-samples.github.io /AKS labs. I'll drop that in the chat for everybody to see. You should be getting that here in a minute. And what is cool about this is that, you not only get the concepts, and which we're going to be talking about some of that today. I got a chance to do that hands-on, which I think it's just an incredible way for you to get going with new concepts and just sharpen some areas of knowledge there. In the AKS labs, we have a set of different themes going from networking, security, storage, operations, platform engineering, and AI. Today, as you go into this lab, let's go into operations. And then in here, you can see there's a few labs. And we're going to go for the first one here called Advanced Observability and Monitoring, which is the first tab I have. You can hide this at the bottom here. The main idea behind this is that when we're using Azure Kubernetes service, we can now use a couple of interesting managed services, namely the Azure Managed Grafana and the Azure Managed Prometheus offers, to tap into telemetry and metrics from our clusters. Previously, if you wanted to do something like that, you would have to roll your own Prometheus and Grafana, which I've done in the past. It is a lot of work. So I'm pretty happy that we actually have something that I can just tap as a service and then get going. A lot of times, as part of my job as a global black belt, I will talk to customers about some pros and cons of running things yourselves or leveraging a service, right? There's always a pros and con about everything. Now, the trade-off here is that you can free your team from having to take care and nurture something like Grafana and just using that as a service, right? You can decouple that from your cluster, and you can then have this holistic view against different assets, pods, services, your cluster, and then just use it. So now your cluster really becomes ephemeral because I can bring it up through, let's say, Terraform or Bicep, and I don't have my entire monitoring stack in the cluster. It's sitting outside, which allows me to have this visibility over the long run. Now, with concepts like that, and going a little bit deeper, what if I actually want to have visibility across my control plane metrics? AKS, being a managed service, we take care of the control plane. You don't pay for that, but you don't manage it either, right? So it's taken care from you. The thing you have visibility until today was the worker nodes. The AKS team is actually allowing you to tap into some of the AKS control plane metrics like the KPI server or etcd, which allows you then to, let's say, do advanced metrics analysis or alerts based on those metrics directly from the control plane. Our idea here is this. We have three objectives for this lab. Again, this is a hands-on lab, so get ready to fire up some stuff in your terminal, and we'll go side by side. Hopefully this is more casual here. We can have this conversation. I am keeping an eye on YouTube. Takes a little bit of time for the questions to show up to me, so I'm not ignoring you. It just takes a little bit of time, but I will answer every question we have in there. The first objective for this is to have this visibility for the control plane metrics, which is the one that we have here. Again, there are some pre-built-in dashboards we're going to use, but I'm going to show you how to create one too. It's going to be quick, but at least it gives you an idea of what you can actually customize and do yourself. The second objective that I have here is to customize the collection of metrics. By that, I mean we can go to the config maps that we will see in a bit, how gets enabled in the cluster. And we're going to be able to toggle on and off some specific metrics and metric collections in it, which allows us to be very, very specific in what we're looking at. And then the last one is I will show you how we can implement script jobs where we're going to use PodMonitor and Service Monitor from Prometheus. This is a part of the CRDs. And then we're going to collect specific metrics from a pod, which you can also do for a service. This will probably make sense at the end of this. All right. So with that, let's get going. The first thing I'm going to suggest you is if you are on Windows or a Mac, that you have a terminal open, right? I'm on Windows subsystem for Linux here, WSL2. This will absolutely also work on just Linux. Actually, why don't you just drop that in the comment there? What are you using for this? This you're looking at right now is my day-to-day work machine. So on one hand here, I have a terminal with bash, and that's one of the prereqs we have here. I do have Azure CLI installed. If you don't have that, you can do the same lab here on Cloud Shell. So if you have to go through Cloud Shell, I have a link in there. You can absolutely do that too. If you're doing this on your machine, please follow along here. So first thing we need is Azure CLI, which I have installed. You can check that too. If you just type AZ, if it is installed, it will show a usage help in a second here with the version. So we're looking for 2.6 or later. That should be somewhat of a newer version of AZ CLI, right? You can check your version by typing AZ version. Okay, and you can even see that I have some updates, but this one will work at this point. We will be installing the AKS preview feature there. You will see that in a second. You do need kubectl. So I have kubectl here as well installed. And then, of course, like you need a terminal to run this. Again, either Cloud Shell or terminal here on Windows or terminal on Mac or, I don't know, Xterm if you're doing this in Linux. Now, the first thing that I want to mention is this. You do need this preview, right? The way, and I've done this on my machine here, but the way you can install an AKS preview extension is by running this command in here. You can always just click on this little copy icon here on the corner and then drop that inside of your terminal, and that will get that installed. I can see some people are just asking for that. I'm just going to drop it here again in case you need the lab. Here is the lab again. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the AKS control plane metrics. Again, traditionally, you wouldn't be able in AKS to tap into these metrics and monitor them. Now, things like the Kube API server, the scheduler, the controller manager, etcd, among other metrics there, were not something we would expose, at least not in the way we're doing here today. Now, there is a preview feature, and that's what we're going to be using, that allow us to tap into those metrics. And then with Manage Grafana, Azure Manage Grafana, we can now visualize these metrics. I did leave a link in here about some prereqs and limitations. We'll open that here so you can kind of see how that looks like. As you go down into what this can or cannot do, there is a detailed amount of information here that you might need for that, right? We do explain about what type of resources and data storage and whatnot. For this specific lab, what I'm going to suggest is this. Uh, we're going to enable this. We're going to create a cluster actually for this to work. And then you can delete this at the end. I mean, you're learning, and you probably want to tweak this whole process after the fact to your own taste, right? Or to reflect what your organization is looking at. So right now, we'll go with what we have in here. I'm just looking at the chat real quick here. There's some people saying that they cannot see the link just yet. So I'll go back here. I'll just verbally say this right now because I don't have any other better way here. So this is the Azure samples dot, so Azure dash samples dot github.io slash AKS labs. Okay, so once there, just real quick on this again. Once there, you will go into, so this is your screen will likely look like this. Just browse the workshops that is on the side here. You have operations, advanced observability, and monitoring. So if you click there, go ahead and this is our lab. So hopefully, Mike, that answers your question there. Okay, so back to this here. We are right now just looking at the AKS control plane metrics, and we have to register this specific feature called Azure Monitor Metrics Control Plane Preview. The way to do that is to do an AZ feature register, which I will do right now. Okay, so Azure feature register, the namespace is called Microsoft Container Service, and then you can see we have the name of our specific feature flag in it, right? So we can see it is registered. I've registered this before. You can check if yours is registered by running the second command here, which essentially, there you go. There's a refresh and checks for the registration. So this is crucial for us to continue here. So if you have to stop here and take a second, please do so, so we can continue to the next step, which is how to set up your environment. Now in here, once this is fully registered, I'm going to recommend something, and you will see this across different labs. The platform engineering lab, which is another lab that I worked on, also applies the same principle. Because we're going to create some files, the last thing I wanted to do is just to scatter files across your file system. So the first thing I'm going to suggest to you is to create a directory, and then we're going to cd into the directory. So it's going to copy this here again. Okay, so what do we have here? I'm just creating a AKS Labs directory. I'm creating an operations section just to mimic exactly what we have in the menu here in this tree here, right? So as you were doing more labs, you would be able to have all of these different labs as directories for you. And then we're just cding into that. That's all I'm doing there. Okay, it's empty at this point. We don't have anything in it. Now, the next thing, again, this is a suggestion to make your life a little bit easier, is we're going to create a .envrc file. It can just be an env file. There's a reason why I'm going to do .envrc, so I'll give you that as a bonus for this. I will copy this out, okay? And in this .envrc file, we'll be declaring our environment variables. Among them, we have a resource group name, a location, and just heads up, chances are you're going to have to change that location because I have quota in a specific location, and you might have quota in a different location. For this example, I'm using West US 3, but you might have to change this to, let's say, East US or East US 2, right? So it depends on where you actually have quota to deploy an AKS cluster. That's pretty important. The RG name, it's the resource group name that I have here. I actually have this 2 times here. Um, for the whole thing, we're gonna try to put everything in a single resource group. So I'll remove that typo now. And then the name of the AKS cluster comes up next. The Grafana name, which we're gonna be using AKS-labs as a prefix. Now I have random in here. I'll explain to you why. Well, this is because when you create a Grafana, a managed Grafana instance in Azure, you do get a FQDN, that is a fully qualified domain name with a public IP address that folks can access through the internet. And that has to be unique. It's a DNS name. So random in Linux, in case you haven't used this here before, right, will give you, it actually taps into dev random /dev /random, and it gets to these numbers here. So we're going to append that so we can create a random instance for Grafana. And the last thing I have is an Azure Monitor Workspace name. This will become clear in a second, but the the magic behind this whole thing here is that when we set up our AKS cluster, we will then bind together an AZ Monitor Workspace that we've created in here. So an Azure Monitor Workspace with Grafana, and then manage Prometheus. So we're gonna essentially tie everything together so the metrics flow nicely here. You can absolutely do this through the portal. It's a fairly easy experience. We will be doing everything to the CLI. So let's create this here, and then I'll change and actually correct my typo. Okay, you will probably not see, if you're reading, if you have really good eyes, you're probably reading this error message here. Don't worry about this. You probably don't have that. But here is something that is not in the labs, but maybe that's helpful to you. I'm actually using something called dir-env, and it's a tool that you can install on Debian-based systems with apt install dir-env. Mac OS also has the same tools. You can even install on BSDs if you're using that for this. So for me, what this does, I'm just gonna call this here so we don't have this this message, is that whenever I see the intro directory, so in this case, I have 2 directories here because I did the scaling with Kata and Carpenter um, last week or a couple weeks ago with Steve Griffith from my team, which was amazing. So highly recommend that from Steve. And in that directory, I also have a .env.rc file. So in Advanced Observability, which is the one we're doing right now, I just created that file. So if I cd into that file, their env will then load automatically all of the variables, including the cluster name, the context, the kube config, and everything like that. So if I cd outside of that, then I'm essentially moving away from a context perspective into a totally separate environment. So this works for me. If you like that, that's just a tip that is not on the lab, but again, this is the day. This is my day-to-day work machine. This is pretty much how I would roll throughout the day. Okay, I'm gonna remove that because you don't need to. So please ignore the second RG name. I'm gonna show you that I have 2 of them. You can delete either the first line or the third line, your choice there. I will change this here because I want to be able to have this in a unique fashion. You can call this anything you want. We're gonna call mine here. And let's just go advanced mon 1 because I have another one created before this lab. My location is West US 3 again. Change this to reflect your own location, the location that you actually have quota for a cluster. The name of my AKS cluster, I'm just going to say the same thing here so I know what cluster I'm using. And then you can see because of that random variable, I have AKS labs 12216. That's going to be part of my FQDN. I will leave, I'll put the 1 in here as well so I know. So this is all I'm going to leave in place for now. Okay. And then again, just for me, you don't have to worry about that. It's my daughter Env, so I just changed that. Now, I can come here and source this, which is my recommendation there. And again, two reasons for that. One is that if you, for some reason, cannot finish this lab right now, you at least know what environment variables you have. So you can recreate or you can resume this. The second one is if you by accident close your terminal, you don't lose anything. You can always go back, source again your envrc, and you're back on the right track there. You can just resume where you were before. Not absolutely necessary steps, but again, I thought about infusing a little bit of my day-to-day practice into this lab, and hopefully that will bring some value for folks. The second thing here that we're gonna do, since now we do have our environment set up in terms of just variables, is we're gonna start creating stuff. It's gonna start to get quite exciting here. First thing, we're gonna create a resource group. AZ group create is the name of the command. We're going for a specific location. Again, in my case, West US 3. In your case, likely different. Second thing, let's go ahead and create a Azure Monitor workspace. So the command here, AZ monitor account create, we're again pointing to that resource group that we've established before in our .envarc file, specific location, and then the name. So the JSON output here tells us that everything succeeded. You can see it in there, and it's ready to go for the next step. Now, real pause on this. I've ran this a few times. If this is the first time you're doing this AZ monitor command, right? We will register the Microsoft.monitor provider, resource provider for you in case you haven't done it before. Just a caveat, because if you run this command and you see that the message that comes back says, hey, do you want to register this? Or, we'll register this for you. Know that that's okay. And it is required by that command to work. So if you haven't done it before, if this is the first time, you will see that message, and that's fine. I mean, you're not doing anything crazy there. The other thing that we have to do now, we need to get the Azure Monitor Workspace ID, which is this command right here, which in essence, it does a couple of things. I mean, this is a variable in Bash. We're getting that populated by this second command that runs in a subshell. The $ and parentheses will essentially fork a child, run a bash command in there, and then get the output, and then put that in the AZ monitor workspace, which we can check right now live. Doing an echo AZ monitor workspace ID, and that should be populated. That's a way for you to know that you're on the right track. Third option here, or third step, I should say, is we need to create a managed Grafana instance. So for this, there's a few things we have to do. The first one is we do need an extension for this to work, for the Azure Managed Grafana, called AMG. We will install or add that extension. We will create a Grafana instance. We'll get the resource ID, which will then be used in the later part, step 4, when we create an AKS cluster. So the first thing is this. We will add this extension. Again, you don't need to highlight here. You can always just click there. I think I have muscle memory, so I'm just copying there. And you can see in my case, I already have AMG installed on 261. And then we're ready to create Grafana. Now, could you do everything that I'm doing through other ways? Say the portal. Yes, you could. The portal actually ties up a few things together for you. I do like going through AZCLI for various reasons. One of which is that I feel that we're decomposing or decoupling this, the build up of the solution. So it is more of a Lego approach where it's like a step by step. You can also do this through infrastructure as code like Terraform, right? That's also a possibility. But I think from a learning perspective, this will give you a solid foundation on how actually things get tied up together. I'm going to do a quick look here on the questions that we have. I see, let me see, Deepin. Hey, Deepin. Is Container Insights getting deprecated? Do you recommend Azure manage Prometheus and manage Grafana over Azure Monitor? These are very good questions. So typically, the way that I would approach this would be, I think there are complementary solutions in there where Azure Monitor going against an AKS cluster, and we'll see that when I finish creating the cluster, we'll take a look at that. But Azure Monitor will give you a lot of information, and which now actually includes a way for you to harvest Prometheus telemetry directly into Azure Monitor. The way that I would structure this would be for a lot of folks, because Azure Monitor is an umbrella of services. So if you're just going directly into the insights for your cluster and getting that information or under monitor, um, I think that will suffice for a lot of organizations in terms of, hey, are things running? Can I run some alerts against those? Yeah, which you absolutely can. Um, Grafana and Prometheus per se are more of are more common in Kubernetes or in cloud native, if I can say that. And organizations that are vested into full blown running everything from the CNCF, they will likely use Grafana and Prometheus. That is my background as well. Um, I think that again there are complementary solutions. I would provide some level of access to both for your SRE or your DevOps or later on your platform engineering folks. So I don't think there are a one or the other. I think they in the Venn diagram of observability they do overlap in a few areas, but they have specific um, areas where they are one is stronger than the other. Okay, it is created now. So at this point, we have a Azure Monitor workspace created. We have a Grafana instance created, and then we're ready to now create our AKS cluster. I'm just going to put this full screen here just for a second. As we create this cluster, you can see that I only have a few knobs, right? And you can probably move one of them, but not every one. The node count here, I just have one node. Originally, when I designed this course or updated the original content from Russell Pina, I had this with two nodes because I was planning on doing some other things, and maybe that's an update in the future. But for now, just one node is fine. Again, we're not going to be hammering this cluster and looking at performance benchmark. We're actually interested in understanding telemetry. So it's one node is fine. You can change that if you're inclined to do it. There are some other things in here, like I'm enable the Azure Monitor metrics, so we can actually have Prometheus. Cost analysis was there originally when this lab was designed. I left that in place because I feel that as we continue to build this lab, we'll revisit this area. And then the two things that are quite important for us. One, we need to pass the manage Grafana resource ID that we just created. That needs to be a part of this creation here. The second thing is the Azure Monitor Workspace resource ID, which we created. We need to pass that as we spin up this new cluster. So with that, let's drop that in here. This will take just a bit of time. Oops, let's see. It looks like I have a typo in here, and we're gonna have to fix it right now. What did I got wrong? Grafana resource ID. Did I got this wrong? Or maybe I did not run this. Sorry, my bad. So I forgot to run this part. And that what's happening when you're actually doing this live. So I forgot to run the Grafana resource ID before the command. So now we do have the cluster being created. Again, this is going to take a little bit of time. Okay, it is running now. While this is running, I will go into the portal here. And let me change this. And let's log in with our MFA. Okay. I want to show you something while that's running. And that's our new cluster. So our new cluster is getting created. I'm just going to let this, I'm going to move this to the side just real quick here. So while I'm waiting for that to run, and you might be waiting for yours as well. As the cluster is creating, we'll check this here in a second. You see, I didn't really change anything. Again, not important for this lab. I didn't change the type of networking. I didn't change any extra extension or anything like that, which is okay. We don't need that for right now. When we have the cluster fully created, we're gonna go back to this area here for monitor. I think Deepin kind of going back to your question. And you can see that there will be a lot of information in here. Actually, let me show you from another cluster that I have already set up while the new one gets created. So in monitor, kind of answering your question, like you can do a lot of stuff here, including enabling alert rules, right? You have a pretty good overview of how your cluster is behaving or performing, right? So I do think that a lot of this here can just be used as is, that you don't have. You can see that for this specific cluster, I actually did not enable Prometheus. I could, right? So it's the simplest way of just get going. I didn't do much more than that in there, but I do have Grafana enable on this cluster here, which we're gonna do the same with a new cluster we're creating right now. An interesting thing about this, I don't know if you've had a chance to see this before, is that you do have some monitor settings. If you go to monitor settings, you can tweak a few of the things that we're going to be tweaking now, some of which actually can be done from here or as ECLI, including the frequency of the logs. I get this question all the time, actually, from our customers. If you go into, again, monitor settings, container logs, and then you change this here, right? You can change the frequency of the collection, and supposedly you don't want to get every log out there, right? Well, you can include or exclude specific namespaces. So you might have an application, you're really just key on looking at that application. That application sits on a namespace. We're going to then include that namespace in the filter. So we're going to just be looking and retrieving information or telemetry from that specific namespace. The other thing I get questioned a lot is syslog. Can I enable or disable syslog collection? You can, and this is how you do it. This is probably the easiest way of doing it, actually. We do have some other options for you in here, performance and workloads and HPA and things like that. And that's part of the collected data, right? And then just how much data you're ingesting. And again, you can change the frequency here for up to 30 minutes if you wanted to do so. Okay, so while this is getting created, let me just go back here. And we are going to wait for this to come back. Real quick, let me just go back here. I'm looking at the chat again to make sure I'm not missing any question. I think mostly about the link of the presentation. But thanks, Larissa, for sharing that for us. Once this is done here, I'm just going to wait for that cluster to go. We got to do a couple of things. We will get the credentials for the cluster. And then again, I'm going to save that credential inside of that .envarc, so that when we, again, if I have to resume this lab, it's easy for us. Okay, my cluster is done. Yours might be as well. So let's save the credentials for us. All right, what do we have now? I do have a little file here called AKS labs-labs.config. That's your kube config. And then I'm going to just add that into my env. Then again, this is just for me here. Now, if I do a kubectl get nodes, I can see that the node and the cluster is only 3 minutes. So that's our actual cluster. I do have a couple of commands in here, so we're going to run that. Okay, that tells me a little bit about just the cluster name. We just want to see if things are up and running. I have some aliases in here. I'm happy to share them here on the chat if you're interested. Which is K. I don't typically will type kubectl all the time, just kget. Let's write pods-a. Just want to see what we have in there right now. Okay. The next thing for us is let's get going with Grafana. At this point, we've done most of the things we had to do in terms of setting up an infra. Again, Azure Workspace is there. Monitor Workspace. Grafana is there. We did enable Prometheus through a flag. So if you do az AKS create, we're going to look for the help in here. We did, because I saw a question here, like, why didn't we enable Prometheus? You actually did enable Prometheus. You did enable Prometheus in Azure Monitor directly, but you had to enable Prometheus there by, let's go up here and here. When you enable the monitor metrics, right? We do have that in the creation of the cluster. So it's a part of the creation. So a couple of things in here now. Again, two approaches. We're going to try to stick to the command line approach. You can absolutely do this through the UI. But for now, what I want to do is this. We're going to create a folder inside of Grafana. I'm going to call that AKS Labs. You absolutely have to. No, it just helps us to be organized with the lab. Okay, so AZ Grafana folder create, the name of your Grafana instance, the title, and then the resource group. And then after that, we want to do a couple of things. One, we want to import the Kube API server and the etcd dashboards into this new Grafana folder. Before I do that, though, let me show you something. If we go into Monitor, and then you click at the top here where it says View Grafana, right? You can see like browse dashboards or the Grafana instances there. I've clicked on the dashboards. And this is how you should be greeted. Now, don't worry too much about this because I will show you how to get here. If it was too fast, or like, wait, where did he click? So there's two ways. One is through the portal. You're going to, again, let's go back here. Go to Monitor on the side of your cluster, click on View Grafana, and then you can just click on Browse Dashboards, just on the right side. That's one way. I'll show you the other way here in a second. But this will drop you into this view. This is your new Grafana instance. And I want you to go on the side here where it says dashboards on the left side of your screen. And the command we just ran created this folder, right? We don't have anything inside, but that's the folder we created. So you could just come here and then click new folder. That works too. But again, I'm trying to show you this through the command line because I do think that the command line will give you a better idea of how things are wired together. So we've created a folder, and now I'm going to create two new dashboards. Again, they are not here. You can see I have no items in there. Let me copy and paste this, and I'll explain to you what they are. So the first one is a Kube API server dashboard, and then the second one is a etcd dashboard. Now, there is a definition number in here, so you could copy that number, go to Grafana, and there's an option that you can import a new dashboard. You just drop that number in place, right? And that will work in the same way I just did right now. These are the two new dashboards, the API and then etcd. So if you click in any one of them, let's see what we get. Well, that's not what we want to see, is it? Look at that. But the dashboards are created. I'll go back to that in a second. The dashboards are in place. So if you are in a state where you did see this, but you have no metrics, it's okay. So don't have to panic at this point. We're gonna let them be for now. All right, remind, like I showed you that you can go here into your cluster, click on monitor, go to view Grafana, and that is a way for you to get access to Grafana. The other way, the command line way, is to actually get that information directly through AZCLI, which is this command here. So we're looking for the endpoint for Grafana, and you can see your Azure Managed Grafana is accessible at this URI. So if you click there, it will drop you into this here. Okay, so that's your expected output. Now, what's happening here is why don't I see anything is that this might take a little bit of time. Sometimes it will take, let's say, 5 minutes for things to populate. I'm going to wait a little bit. I actually have to go back here. There might be something. It's not fully populated just yet. So I'm just going to wait for that to finish there. When I go back here and check on on the Kubernetes side, on the AKS side, how things are going there, and is everything correctly done? Yes, they are. I do have an Azure Monitor Workspace, which I'll show you right now. So we click in there. Let me just see if I can just click like that here. If you do go to the AZ Monitor Workspace, you will see that on your left side of the screen, under Manage Prometheus, we have, there you go, we have the Prometheus Explorer. The query that comes in by default is called up, just to see if this instance is up, and it's fine. And that's really what we're looking for here. You can also double check if your cluster is being monitored by going to monitor cluster. And you can see in my case, I have the advanced mon-1 as part of the workspace. So I am expecting that this will populate here in a second, right? I don't see the cluster here for some reason, but we'll have to troubleshoot that together. It hasn't showed up just yet, but it will. Okay, so at the end of the day, this is what you should be looking at. So why do I need the workspace ID? I'm just going to wait for that to come back here. The reason you need the workspace ID there is that you're tying up this here. So let me go back one level. It's a little more clear for you. Okay, so as we go back to AKS, right, and then this one here in monitor settings, you can see that manage Prometheus, when we have this telemetry, we're seeing that somewhere, right? That somewhere for us here will be an Azure Monitor Workspace. So I have to tie that ID of that resource to this, with this AKS cluster. So I'm like bridging everything together at that point and linking. And then, of course, later on, how do I visualize that? Well, I visualize that through Grafana. But I need to have a way to plumb everything together from a telemetry perspective. But this is a very good question there. Now, not sure why this isn't showing up just yet for me, but it doesn't show in here. So let me just back up here for a second, make sure I am in the right place. I do have a few of these. This might be because we have something updating. Yes, so this was still, there is still some update process happening there. Okay, it does says running. It didn't propagate here just yet. So I won't waste your time there. I'll wait for this here. I'm gonna be refreshing this on the other screen, and then I'll come back to that in a second. But for now, I do want you to see how this looks like as we wait for that new cluster to populate. So on this cluster here, so apologies for this being a little bit of a cooking show where I show you how things get done and then I remove a turkey ready to be eaten from the oven. Um, but you will eventually get there. It's just taking time for the telemetry to propagate. Ta-da! That's how it should look like, and it will soon on the other cluster. Um, you should be able to see something like this, right? This would be the Kube API server dashboard, the one that we imported, and then you have the etcd one as well. Okay, that's how it should look like. And again, on my cluster here, it's just taking a little bit of its time um, to propagate. But at the end of the day, you're gonna see what I just showed you, and this is what the screenshot shows as well. Now, a couple of things in here as we move along. We were able to just put these new dashboards, and what this is doing right now is showing you information that you did not have access before. Like before, this is how it would look like. Okay, it's like missing components in here. As you enable the control plane metrics now to flow and then be displayed in Grafana, you will now see information like from etcd and the database. You can also look at the API. If you suspect there is something in the API, or maybe you are looking at a specific parameter in the API and the Kubernetes API server, and maybe you're going to scale out of that, or you need an alert. Well, this will get that covered. You can see there's a few quite interesting telemetry that we get out of this dashboard, and I didn't do anything here. I just imported. So this is ready to be used, right? And that's the number one objective there. If we move on a little bit here, I want to show you how to customize a collection of metrics. At this point, we do have the Kube API server and etcd being collected, but then there are other ways to do this too, which is through specific ingestion profiles. The minimal ingestion profile will get you a bunch of stuff, to be quite frank, but chances are you want to have something that is not in there. I've selected one metric for us to test, but there are way more than that. The Kubernetes metrics reference, which is also on the lab, will have a lot of metrics. Like you can go metrics nirvana with this. Out of those, I've selected the API long running requests. The This one API server long running request, sorry. This will allow us to test our idea here of tapping into a specific metric. Um, for this to work, we will do this. There is a config map. Okay, we're gonna deploy that, and we're gonna change that on the fly on our AKS cluster. And we will add under the control plane API server that specific new metric. Again, you can add more, and if you were to add more, you would pipe separate them. So you would put the first metric, put a pipe, second metric, put a pipe, and so forth and so on. You can also shut down or turn off some of this. So if you don't want to see any etcd, you can. You can just go in this file and I'll show you how to do it. So first thing here, we will apply this new config map. And you can see this was created. After that, a couple of things in here. We're gonna edit this config map. Okay, so kubectl edit cm short for config map, AMA metric setting config map under the kube system namespace. Once we have that open, we have to just scroll down a little bit. Two primary areas here. One is what is by default being collected, right? You can see that we're interested in these areas here, the control plane. API server is true, etcd is true. I can turn them to false, and that would essentially stop flowing of these metrics. Okay. For this example, I don't want to turn anything to false. I actually want to come down here where it says control plane. Oops, sorry, this way here. Control plane API server equal, which is right in here. And you want to add under the keep list, which is where I am right now. So make sure you are in the default targets metric keep list. Okay, where it says API server, we will add this here. API server long running request. Okay, just copy that, paste it, boom, in place. If you are doing this like I am in VI, and kudos to you if you are saving this. So WQ, get that saved. Now, again, it might take a minute or so. We will go back into, so I'm going to close this here. I'm going to go now to verify that this actually worked, right? We're going to go into our Azure Monitor Workspace. Because remember, you do have a Prometheus Explorer in here, and that's exactly what we're going to be using. And I'm going to drop the name of the metric in there. Now, it's a bit of a cooking show because my other cluster is still populating. But in a very similar cluster, this is how it looks like. You would see the no metrics flowing, right? And they wouldn't be flowing before. You would see a curve coming up, just kind of like what we have here. That tells me that this is actually working, that the metrics are now flowing because I went to the config map and I changed that. But that metric on its own doesn't show anywhere. Like there's no way that I can see this other than coming in here, right? I will give you a 30-second crash course on how to get that in Grafana. So let's go. We're gonna go to Grafana, back up here. It's gonna be tough for me to do side by side here because you might not be able to visualize, but we're gonna go into our new folder called AKS Labs, into the API server, and we're gonna add the visualization in there. Okay, so I'm gonna try this. Bear with me here for a second. Under API server, okay, which I do have in there, but we're gonna just create a new one. I'm not gonna even look into that, but it will look like exactly like that. In here, we need to add. So add visualization. So just by share, add. And you get something like that. Like it's plain, like there's nothing in here right now. We're gonna put a title for that. I'm just gonna drop the name of that metric. Okay. I'm gonna put live in front so you know that I'm doing this live right now. And then in the by default, this is a time series. You don't have to change that. I do mention that in the information for the lab in case you end up landing in some other scenario here, like, I don't know, a gauge or a bar chart. Time series is what we want. The other thing I want you to be looking at is a data source, right? It should be prom_ds. That's a variable that points to that manage Prometheus. If it's not, make sure you click here and you set it up. Where? Right here, where it says data source. We're not gonna change a lot of the other stuff there. So I left you with a step-by-step instruction for this, including now the actual query. So for you to do that, though, if you look into this here, that's not how typically you would go like that. Because I've been using this a lot on this environment, it already saved my preference. You would look at a builder. We don't want a builder, we want a code. Go into code, and you can drop that specific query that I have in there, right? Just the rate of that specific metric over time. And you can see that. That's the new metric, the one we just added. Two things in here. If you apply, you're applying but not saving. If you save, you're doing both at the same time, applying and then saving. So let's go for save. Okay, that's our brand new metric flowing right now through Grafana, right? And save, current variable to default, sure, save, apply here. So this will eventually also populate in there. And I'm gonna change this to, let's see, did I miss something here? I did. I didn't save it. That would never work, right? There you go. Okay, so now we do have that metric saved. I just didn't save before. Um, okay, with the time we have, which isn't a lot of time, I want to make sure I cover at least the last part here. So that saves and then shows you this new metric directly in Grafana, which means if you go back to this really, really long reference of metrics that Kubernetes made it available for you, you can now pretty much grab one of them, put that in the config map, the one we just changed, and then have that populated back into Grafana. The last one here, I'm just gonna kind of go over with the time that we have. I find this to be quite interesting, and what that is how to do custom script jobs for Prometheus, in this case for managed Prometheus. So imagine this, imagine we actually have a pod, and that pod, if I hit it is in a specific endpoint, I have metrics. So let's suppose we have like a weather-related pod, right? We're getting information about the environment. Um, you can actually, with Prometheus, there is a custom resource definition, a CRD, that we're going to be using. You can tap into those metrics and then flow that up into Grafana. We're looking at PodMonitor and Service Monitor. They do differ slightly. This should become very natural for all of us doing Kubernetes for a while. PodMonitor will actually be able to hit a direct pod based on labels and retrieve that information and then ship that upwards so we can visualize in Grafana. Service Monitor will do an equivalent of that, but it's using labels, but it's a service that can then have endpoints behind it. So very similar things that we've done before. Real quick here, we're going to deploy an app. And that app actually comes from us. You can see that it's in the Prometheus collector there. And what you get out of that, just want to make sure that we get the app information, is this new application that will generate some telemetry for us. So again, instead of going and looking at the classic things like CPU or memory or disk pressure, we're hitting a specific endpoint in the pod. Let me just see here. I think my pod is up and running. Let me see. Nope, it's not yet. It's container creating. Now it's running. Okay. So I can see it's running. Now we're going to deploy a PodMonitor. And once that's in place, what is cool about it is that we can get the name of the pod. I just want to make sure that this actually works. Yes. And we could port forward to that on port 9090. So localhost 9090. Okay. So now I'm actually going directly to that Azure Monitor Agent pod on that port number 9090 for Prometheus agent. And then if I click on status, I can see targets and service discovery. Those are the two that we're interested in. On the targets, and this is probably still just populating at this point, we will see the actual endpoint that we're looking for, which is this matrix here, right? Status is, yep, it's up now. We're gonna hit that. I can't do this right now from where I am unless I have some sort of VPN. But I will do this in another way. So just bear in mind, this is what I'm hitting. You can also, if you don't want to do pod, you can also do through service, right? You would be able to do the same thing. But let's go with the pod. So from a pod perspective, if we want to see those metrics, let's go back here real quick. Targets, we're listening on port 2113. You can see my instructions are slightly different here. Let me see if they populated with the other one here. You should have more than one. Okay, we're gonna change this on the fly here too. So 2113 is that's the port for that one. I will do this. I will port forward to 2113. Okay, so you might have to change that on your side. And then I can either curl or just point my browser into this here, which is 2113, not 2112. And it's probably still coming up with some stuff in there because it didn't show. But these are generic values that the pod will have. Let me go back here real quick to this. Okay. And then out of those, if the time that we don't have at this point, um, you'll be able to see something like this. You would see all of the metrics. This pod is probably still coming up at this point, but you get a lot of different metrics. The metrics are not related originally to just a pod. I mean, this is looking at rainfall. Conceptually, it's the same thing that we did before. Now that you actually have this running, right, you would be able to go back to Prometheus and look for those metrics, right? So something like max dimension and rainfall. That's just a metric that came out of the pod. The pod could be putting out information about an API rate limit or request and things like that. And you would be able, with what we have now, to go back and then tap into this specific pod and retrieve its information. At the end of the day, right, you would have a diagram pretty similar to the one that I'm showing you right now there. Um, in fact, let me try something else here. I just realized that. Let me see if I just can get some information about the pod here. Okay. Yeah, 2112 is there. Okay, and 2113 is there too. Okay, so let me just try one more time the port forwarding here. See if we can see that. I know we have a couple of minutes. And I'm also happy because I'm kind of, just because of the timing, kind of going a little bit too fast on some of this here, faster than I typically would. So I'm happy to take any questions offline. Okay, so here we go. So now the pod is really online, and we can see all of the information from this pod. Again, this is just some generic stuff. You have rainfall and whatnot. And as we see this, we can then get any one of these metrics and then put that in Grafana. which would allow us to get visibility into that as well. So if you were to go back into, I don't need that in there, go back to your Azure Managed Grafana instance, and then go to Explore. And then in here, you can paste, one of these. Let's say, what is this? Max dimension rainfall summary. In the metrics browser, oops, which is not running there, and you would get right something like this here. Let me just see if I can expand my screen, and then we can run the queries. So this is what you would see, right? You're looking at that specific new metric coming from the pod, because we're now using um, the PodMonitor under the CRD, we would be able to see that. So with this, there are two things. One, this is not totally a cooking show. That is the cluster we created together, and it is up and running, although I was using the other one. So it's up and running. You can see the new metrics online. I want to finish this with the following. I think this allows us to not only look at this control plane metrics and then retrieve them. If we have to do some monitoring, we can. If we have to inspect, if we suspect there's something happening, and we're gonna get a heads up, we can do that too. But more than that, I think that the fact that we can now use what we have and look into very specific, let's say, metrics from a pod. Let's suppose you have a microservice with an API, and you are now putting out some specific information. Again, rate limit could be one. Maybe you have JVM running and you want to expose some extra information about, I don't know, the garbage collection through some sort of metrics API, kind of like what we have here. You can, and you can then now flow this whole information back into Grafana. I'll leave you with that. Apologies if this was a little bit fast, but I am happy to take any questions right now or offline. I mean, you can reach me out on LinkedIn. I'm happy to work with you there. Hope you had a good time on this, and hope you try it out.
Thank you, Diego. I don't think we missed any questions.
Okay, I'm just real quick looking at that. Can you capture logs and trace? So log and traces are interesting. I'll just tackle on that one. Typically, what you're looking for, when I mention what Azure Monitor can do for you, that by default you're not going to be able to just do that with Prometheus and using Prince and Grafana, would be exactly what you're asking for. So if you do go under Monitor and you do drop into a pod, you can see its standard output. Now, there is another way to do that. And I'm gonna have this one in here. So, but that's how you would go for it. Let me see if I have any other cluster running, so you can see that in real time. This one is running. Just double check that. If it's in there, I'll show you. I'll have right now. But if not, this is where you would see. You would go to, yeah, I don't have it enabled, but you would go to workload or containers, and you can see that in here. The other way to do that, though, is to instrument the cluster, and later on you would do this with syslog. And there are ways to get that information, although I don't recommend. I think if that's what you want, I would probably just go with kubectl and get the logs, or you go through Azure Monitor and get that information. I don't think I would want to that level of standard output flowing all the time to my dashboard like Grafana. There are other tools that will also get you that information, but that is a excellent question, by the way. I think that you're thinking ahead of like, how can I leverage all of these separate tools from my SRE team or platform engineering team. So thank you for asking that question. Okay, Larissa, if there is no other question here, I think we made it.
Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you, Diego. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Okay, thank you all for joining us today. We are always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. So if you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find the link on the screen or in the chat. We'll see you on the next one.